Hey everyone, it's Corey Tindall Filmmaking, and I'm here with another interview. Today I'm talking to my friend Mike. Mike, thanks for joining us today.
Thanks for having me.
Yeah, man. Mike might look familiar because if you've seen some of the short films on my channel, he has been in some of them, like Penance and Vengeance, and he actually was in Moving On. It's kind of like a side role. But yeah, I wanted to talk to Mike today, just hear some of the creative projects he's been working on, talk about those, and then just wanted to have some time to pick his brain about like writing a good story. And for all of those of you who are watching and want to get into filmmaking, or you're like, I can't find an idea for my first short film or my first feature film, Mike's a great guy to talk to. He's written lots of stuff. He is a writer, director, actor, all the stuff. But Mike, why don't you introduce yourself?
I'm Michael Morea. I write books. I go and make short films. Sometimes I act in those films. I usually write them, I direct them, I edit them. My brother's a key part as well in these productions. And I also do that as a hobby while maintaining my other job, which is being an attorney. So work on a little bit of everything and try to go and keep my skills up. But I also work on the side with Corey when he's available to go and make projects as well.
Yeah, definitely. We've done a number of creative projects together.
Yep.
And then we also podcast together too.
Oh yeah, of course. Yeah, we've been doing that for a while as well. So yeah, we are involved in all aspects of the creative process and the critiquing process too when it comes to doing the podcast, because we go and review films together. So we like to go and talk about all aspects of film. Hopefully we learn the lessons from some of the bad movies that we go and review, and we try to apply it to the lessons of what not to do to our filmmaking as well.
Yeah, it definitely is a heavy weight to review a film and it's like, wow, that really sucked, and then try to apply it to my own filmmaking and be like, I don't want to make the movie that's gonna suck.
Yeah, exactly. Well, and one thing that I try to do is sometimes I really like sometimes the premises or the plots or the concepts of these movies, and then I feel like they went wrong somewhere, and then I try to make like my rebuttal or my like version of it, but better or something like that when it comes to some of my various works. So sometimes failures can go and fuel you, and you can draw interesting lessons from things that you don't like even.
Yeah. Definitely. We've been working on some different creative projects. Like recently, I released Moving On. It's a short film that I wrote and directed. We filmed earlier this year, and I had Missy on for an episode a while ago just to talk about it and hear stuff from her perspective. But, real quick, you were an actor in the short film too. I bounced the script off of you a couple times just to get your thoughts and stuff. But, I just want to hear, what's your initial reaction to, seeing the final product, seeing yourself in it, any and all the things?
So seeing the final product, it was cool to kind of see how it was all put together. Obviously, I was there on set. I saw you, filming it yourself and the angles that you were choosing. And I also saw all the takes that we did of all these really emotional scenes. And so I was very curious, which one of those were the ones that you were going to go and choose to implement, and how you were going to fit it together. And I felt like while watching you, I had a pretty good idea of some of the better takes, and then also how things were going to fit together. But it's a little different, just seeing it put into action at the very end, seeing the final product. I think that you made some good choices, and some of the things that you edited, and some of the stuff that you edited out. And I think it serviced the story. And I thought that it was cool as you were making it. We were all kind of having different levels of input on how things were going, maybe making suggestions to the story. And I think it ended up being a stronger product because of the collaborative atmosphere. And I think it got closer to what maybe you intended from the start by kind of working on and molding it, sometimes directing the actors in certain directions. And so, I thought that it ultimately resulted in the best form of what it could be when I saw the final product.
Yeah, I definitely loved all what you're saying, the collaborative effort, because it's I came up with the idea and the script and all the stuff, but I love being on set and getting everybody's creative input about stuff. And being a director, it's you're kind of steering the ship to the intended direction that you have. But I think a big part of it is like
Hmm.
making sure everybody knows where we're going, but then they're also like uniquely contributing their talents to that, because that's why you ask them to be there. Like that's why you ask them to act. And yeah, I really love the creative, collaborative atmosphere that we all had. And
Yep.
yeah, I'm really proud of the final film, like how it came together. So it's one of the things I've been most proud to work on recently.
Yeah, and I think it was just a good experience for me as someone who writes and directs and acts. That this time this was just something I had a small part in acting in. I didn't write it. I wasn't directing it, and so I got to see how another person's style meshed with the actors, how they organize things. And so it was useful for me, and it was also kind of refreshing just to be able to focus on one thing versus five or six different
Yeah.
things. So it was a cool experience to be a part of as well.
Oh, I feel that. Yeah, well, I'm super glad that you're a part of it. And like one more question about the film. I would just love, since you've seen it now and you were kind of part of the creative process, like just on set, what intrigues you, or like what intrigued you about the story and why? Like watching it now and you've seen it, like what about the story is interesting, or, like what kind of grabs you?
Well, I thought what was interesting about it was there's not like really any sort of clear villain or antagonist or protagonist. It's kind of just people being people and dealing with
Yeah.
people problems.
Yeah.
And so it's not painting anybody as necessarily in the wrong. It's just people made decisions,
Yep.
and those decisions had repercussions, and they might have hurt in the moment, but then you can choose to like learn and grow from those experiences. And clearly one character did, and another one kind of
Yeah.
didn't, but it wasn't coming down exactly harshly on that character, Missy's
Yeah.
character. It's just that's what happens. I mean, she's still going to go and get married, or she's still in a relationship, with this other guy, and so with this new guy, and so she's clearly in a way moved on, but also she still hasn't maybe changed or learned her lesson. So I thought it was an interesting uh, place to end the movie as well. It's not exactly condemning her, but at the same time, she clearly has some room to grow
Yeah.
and move on in the way that the other character did. And so, for that reason, I thought that it was an interesting story.
Yeah, I I love how you said it's like, is this people being people? Yeah,
Yeah,
there's not really like an antagonist. It's like we are our own antagonists.
right. Just human
Yeah,
nature,
yeah.
and,
Human nature is
and
the antagonist.
right, and trying to be close to people, but not being able to, or doing so imperfectly, causes problems, and there's tension, and so I found that very relatable. And while I haven't been maybe in an exact situation like this, we can all think of, a rough relationship where you were this close, but the areas where you were a little different, you rub against each other in a
Yeah.
particular way, in a rough way, and it just causes tension and friction, and it ultimately can't fit together. And so, for that reason, I thought that it was a very honest movie as well.
Oh yeah, thanks, man. I really wanted to capture that rawness, that things don't always work out, and like you said, it's like we make choices, sometimes they're mistakes and they have repercussions, and we have to deal with that and we have to process that, and how we choose to do that affects our growth as people. And yeah, I like the idea of just really getting a real like up close and personal look at that. And the main thing that I focused on in this film was like writing characters that felt real. The
Hmm.
most feedback I've gotten about this film is like, oh, it felt like I was in the room, and like
Yeah.
these were real people, or people telling me like, oh yeah, I've like been in a relationship like that, or I've witnessed a conversation like that. And so yeah, I was just really proud. All of you guys brought your A game. Like, Missy and Jordan killed it. Uh,
Yeah. Oh, yeah, for sure.
so much of my editing was just watching like amazing takes of
Hmm.
crying or people yelling at each other and just having to be like, okay, this one is really good, but this one's also good. And like, yeah,
Yeah.
so it, it was great. Um,
I don't envy you for having to choose between some of those takes, because there were a lot of good ones. And I guess I'm curious, like what made you make the choices that you did sometimes between those takes? What were you looking for when you were doing that?
yeah, I mean, sometimes it just comes down to like, did I nail the shot in this particular
Mm,
scene? I mean, usually I'm going off of performance. Sometimes Jordan or Missy gave me like a slightly different inflection on different ways that they said things, and so sometimes I go for that, or even just gestures or the way that they did an action. There's just something about seeing it where it's like that. It's got to be that one. Like I've got to have that one in there, and yeah, like it just sometimes kind of comes down to like as you're just making the edit, you're like, this is what feels right. Like I'm just gonna go with this one. So yeah, I
hmm
mean, definitely is not. It was not an easy thing to get the film to like a picture lock of like there's so many good choices. What am I gonna do?
Right.
But
Yeah,
yeah,
exactly.
I
No,
mean
yeah, it was an
they were
embarrassment of
awesome.
riches and great acting. Yeah, I agree.
Yeah, moving on is great. I love working on projects with all of you guys, but you have just had a film release, and one of the reasons I want to bring you on here and talk about all the stuff. But you had a feature film, Shadows of the Precinct, just come out recently.
That's right. So it's a little bit different genre than the one that we worked on together.
Yeah,
Yeah, it's Shadows of the Precinct. It's an action comedy cop movie, basically, a detective movie, but obviously it goes to sometimes ridiculous places because we like to break the fourth wall.
yeah,
And it's about 50 minutes, and we went and premiered it at a local theater here in town, but then we also put it on YouTube. And the response to it has been really good. We had a really good reception at the premiere that was very empowering and made all the blood, sweat, and tears worth it. And
yeah,
since then we've had a lot of good feedback too. And it was a lot of fun to go and make, but it was a long process.
yeah,
It's a lot different going from making something like Moving On, which we did in 2 or 3 nights,
yeah,
and then obviously there's a lot of still dozens of, if not hundreds of hours of editing
yeah,
involved. But then doing this, it took us about 6 months to go and film, and
yeah,
then a lot more time just editing it as well, and
yeah.
trying to secure places for
Yes.
the
Oh yeah.
premiere and all that stuff. So it was very complicated, but it was also very rewarding, and so
Yeah.
I really enjoyed making this.
Yeah, and it's an awesome film, and I want to ask you about the
Thank you.
Precinct series in general, the Precinct extended universe. I don't know, but
The saga.
like for all of you watching it, like I'll have a link in the description or a card someplace. You need to go check out the film; it's great. But like Mike and his brother Matthew, every time they've made a film, they have just stepped stuff up. And I kind of came into knowing them around like the middle film, and I got to be a part of that. But like every time progressively as they've made these films, it's just the quality, the acting, the writing, everything just gets better. And this film was like, it just continued that trend, and it was just so good. And I got to see it. Mike got to give me a private screening of it when I was in town, and yeah, it was awesome and it's great. So yeah,
Thanks,
it's
man.
just awesome. I'd love to hear like share with everybody a little bit more of like what is the Precinct, like how did it come about, the history there, like why are these films important to you? Anything you want, just give us all the context.
Sure. So I've been making little films with my brother Matthew since we were kids, basically when I was in, I don't know, fourth grade or something like that, and he was in second grade. And so, we're playing around with our parents' camcorder, making funny little skit videos, Saturday
That's
Night Live
awesome.
kind of sketches, all that kind of stuff. And I became really good friends. One of my best friends is named Slade. He also, from a very young age, joined with us every summer. We'd go and start filming stuff. And so when I was in high school, we made a movie, Slade and my brother Matthew, and we called it The Precinct, 3.5, because we just start off naming these things ridiculously. And it was about two cops. It was a buddy cop movie, and it was just all these ridiculous things happen as to these high schoolers playing detectives. So not exactly the most convincing roles at that time,
Yeah.
but we were just making movies every summer together in our high school years, and we just continued making films as friends and increasing the size of the friend group. Every new friend that we got would be a part of the movies eventually. And eventually, I kind of slowed down with those things as I was in college. But then I went into grad school, I went into law school, and I realized I needed creative outlets because the world of law is a little dry. And I went back into writing, which is something that I did also on the side in high school, writing novels. but also went back to making films and reviving the Precinct movies, these adventurous buddy cop movies. And we started including people who were a little more professional, people who had film school aspirations or who were theater actors in town or had commercial work.
Mm-hmm.
And we've been continuing that every couple of years since then. And that's what's led us here, while also trying to improve our technical ability, get more professional equipment, and just increase the size and the scope, and have some real world location filming. And I think
Yeah.
this is the culmination of everything that we've learned so far, and hopefully we can keep going forward with it in the future.
Yeah, it's just cool to hear all the history there where it's like it just it was this passion and you guys just started when you were like really young and like it has just continued to grow and got more people involved and yeah, it's really cool and it's really fun to be a part of these films. Like I love that it's kind of that cop buddy action style genre I like.
Mhm.
I love all the like breaking the fourth wall and everything. It's really good. Like the writing is great.
Well, yeah, thank you for that. And I think we as time goes on, we begin to fill into or grow into our roles a little bit, and we become a little bit better dramatic actors. But at the same time, I admit we're making movies on a budget, and we don't have
Yeah.
always all the resources that a big film studio does. And so what we try to do is we try to have movies that have some comedy aspect, which kind of lampshade sometimes maybe the lower budget aspects of a film,
Yeah.
but
Yep.
also get you to lower your defenses a little bit, because I think comedy is a great way to go and chip away at that kind of standoffish, like,
Mm.
oh, like
Yeah.
impress me movie feeling that a lot
Yeah.
of us critical people
Yeah.
have. Um, and
Yep.
and slowly, like when you kind of open up your heart to the jokes and the laughter, that allows sometimes the heartfelt message that I try to go and apply to our movies, the themes or whatever, the dramatic elements to affect you more deeply. I think that elasticity to these movies is an important quality, and it lets you be vulnerable, because people
Yeah.
aren't suspecting or expecting that it's going to go and hit that level or reach that point.
Yeah.
And so, I think that, it's also a balancing act with the tone that we try to achieve.
Mm-hmm.
Because, yeah, we have ridiculous stuff, but then, almost every single one of the movies eventually kind of locks down on like a more emotional part toward the end.
Yeah.
And,
Yep.
I think that we're getting better at achieving that each time. And, hopefully we can make something that's just like, pure drama all the time, but maybe not with the Precinct. The Precinct's got a very
Yeah.
distinct style, but
Yeah.
I think that it's a great way of helping us grow into our role and abilities as filmmakers.
If you're watching, definitely go check out Shadows of the Precinct. It's great stuff. Another thing I wanted to talk to you, Mike, about is this like, you're a writer, you've written a number of films, you've written a couple published novels. So you're very familiar with like the concept of a story. And even on this channel, I teach a lot of stuff about filmmaking. So like all the camera side and the technical stuff. But then I also do videos about like actually how to like tell a story, get the ideas for it. I'd love to hear some of your thoughts about like, just in particular. I know it's a very big loaded question, but like what makes a good story?
Well, I think that ultimately what makes a good story is you're right. That's a big question, but
Yeah.
I, I think you have to come in with an idea of what are you trying to say with this.
mm,
One thing that bugs me, and we go into this sometimes in our podcasting reviews on Real Perspective, is are these people who they come in with really great concepts, but then they don't know how to land the story in the end.
yeah.
And to me, I think the
Yep.
most important thing is where you end the story, and you work
Yeah.
backwards from there to try to justify why it ends that way.
Yeah.
And so, I think to me, sometimes the hardest part of writing a story is the beginning, because like I know how I want it to end. I know
Yeah.
what I
Yeah.
want it to
Yep.
say. I know what like I want you to walk away with. I just need to try to figure out how to get there. And
Yeah.
so it's like a reverse construction almost, just trying to make that happen. And so to me, I think the most important thing in trying to craft a good story is you figure out what is the theme, and where are you taking your characters. Your characters
Mm,
have to go somewhere, and
yeah.
they have to start in one place and end in another place. And sometimes some characters don't need to. I mean, sometimes like there's characters who I think can be kind of static, or maybe
Yeah.
they're so moral, or they have some sort of quality that, but at the same time they have to be tested, and maybe that gets tested, and they have to bend it, or they have to fight back against the impulse to bend it,
Mm,
and that's where the story is too. So you have
Yeah.
to think about, what character arc is suiting the theme as well, and
Hmm.
don't try to include elements of it that contradict that. I mean, there's something else that bugs me is where you go and come up with a story and a theme, and then like all the supporting evidence of your story and theme and character arcs actually contradict the theme that you're trying to make. So
Yes.
you want them to cohere and work together, not be an opposite, or not have 80% of the text be against what you're actually trying to
Yeah,
say.
totally. As you were saying that, I could think of numerous films.
Yeah, some of them have probably been harped on several times or many times over the course of our podcast careers.
Yes, yes. That's really good and that's really helpful. It's like, what are the arcs of the characters? What are you presenting in your story that should be supporting your theme? It's kind of like when you learn how to, write an essay in school and you talk about like, here's your thesis statement, and that should be like, this is what I'm going to say. And then you have to write stuff that backs that up. It's kind of the same way in film. It's like, if this is the big theme
Hmm.
you want to land on, you need to do stuff to support it and write arcs for characters that like takes them and takes all the other things and make sure like you stick that landing of like, this is the theme that I want to make sure people walk away with.
Yes. Yeah, exactly. And yeah, your analogy to writing an essay or whatever is exactly what I think of every single time. I was very
Hmm.
academic, and
Yeah.
and very into school and all that. And so, I always think about making the thesis, thinking of supporting paragraphs, and then delivering on the conclusion, the arguments that you were making in the supporting paragraphs. You can't just go and have a theme or a statement made at the very end of your movie that's
Yeah.
unsupported by anything else. Where you're like, wait a minute, what? What? Like, where did this come
Yeah.
from?
Yeah.
Uh,
Yep. Oh yeah, I'm so there with you. We could do a whole rant about that, like so many
yeah.
films. But relating the story, so it's like that's, just we're in a nutshell. That's how you find a good story. But a really big thing that's important to that is the characters who populate your world, the characters in your story. And we're talking about movies, we're talking about films. There's so many movies that I see nowadays where it's just like the characters just aren't interesting for one reason or another. And again, like that could be its whole other thing. But just from your perspective, you've
Hmm.
written so many things, you've written different types like of characters and different genres. What makes a good character? Like what makes a character interesting? Whether it's your protagonist or antagonist, or you said like your static versus your round character. Like what makes a good character?
Well, it's related to the discussion about what makes a good story, and I think it relates to. I didn't quite say this when I was talking about making a good story, but you want your theme to be relatable and human, and I think it's the same thing with making your
Hmm.
characters. I think you want your characters to be relatable and human, and so to me, when
Yeah.
I'm writing, I try to draw upon myself. Like a lot of my characters are different aspects of myself. You have the
Mm.
angry part of me, you have maybe
Yeah.
the righteous part of me, you have the part of me that's sarcastic, and so I go and draw upon that, and I try to make those characters genuine and human, because I think what makes a good character is the fact that you can relate to them, that they have some sort of humanistic quality that you recognize in
Yeah.
yourself or in other people that and that they're being driven by purpose or by some sort of goal that's relatable, at least for the dramatic characters. And the comedic characters
Yeah.
might be a little
Yeah.
different,
Yeah.
but that there's some element of the human condition that's being represented by them. Maybe a different worldview. We're not all
Yeah.
one person ourselves. We have different competing thoughts and philosophies and desires in us. And so I try to draw that out and kind of, what is this part of me? What does it want
Mm.
versus that other part? And how would
Yeah.
those aspects of me come into conflict? And so, or I think about my friends or people I'm close to. How would maybe they have different ways of articulating things. I try to put myself in their shoes, what their wants and desires are, and how they would come into conflict potentially with different ideologies or problems.
Mm.
And so I'm always trying to think about how it relates to the real world, even in like ridiculous, pressure situations or with
Yeah.
while being confronted with ridiculous challenges like sometimes might happen
Yeah.
in the course of my own stories in the Precinct, but also in the fantasy books I write. Obviously,
Yeah.
I'm not being confronted by a magic demon or something like that,
Yeah.
but like how would I respond, to these kind of
Yeah. Yeah.
ridiculous, fantastical situations? So that's what I'm always thinking of when I'm trying to write good characters.
Yeah, that's really good. I think the human relatability is such a big thing, because when we watch characters that we can't relate to, or we don't know anybody like that, or there's that lack of humanness, I feel like that's the biggest like disconnect. um and I think along with that too, like I'm even thinking like, when I've written characters, and like we talked about moving on earlier, like you pointed out that it's like with those characters, it's not necessarily like somebody is right and somebody is wrong, but it's like you see a whole person,
Hmm.
um, and you see a character who has flaws, because all of us as people have flaws. We think differently, like you talked about. We have different worldviews, and I think that is a huge thing too, going along with what you said of like making a believable and a good character is like you see their strengths and where they excel and like how they would respond in a situation, but you also see like their failures and you see their weaknesses. And I feel like a lot of times, sometimes people can fall into the trap when they're writing characters of like, this character just has to do, like, they have to go from A to B.
Hmm.
And, maybe they have this in their background and whatever, but they don't actually like give us more of the human relatability. And that includes like their desires, how they think about things, their worldview, but then also like where they come short and where they have weaknesses, because we all have that. And I think that's super relatable.
Yeah, I agree with you. And I think the worst thing that you could do is you make the character go from A to B because the plot demands it, not because that
Yeah.
character's personality demands it.
Yeah.
I know plot-driven writing versus character-driven writing. Obviously you need to make some things happen because that's the only way that something in the plot can happen. But you have to
Yeah.
try to justify it through the character and what their personality, what their goals are. And so I think
Yeah.
that's a key aspect of writing good characters as well.
So all of that's really interesting. I love hearing about like your creative process and stuff. And so I think kind of the last big question I have for you, and again, the people who watch my channel want to learn about cameras, they want to learn about filmmaking and like the storytelling aspect of that. What advice would you give for somebody who wants to make a film? And what I mean by that is like, what is like the big picture in that? So like kind of at the macro level, and then like what are like the micro level, like the details about like actually like making it happen. And maybe somebody who's like, they've shot stuff with the camera, maybe they have ideas in their head, like what advice would you give them? Like where do you start?
I think the biggest place to start is to just start doing something.
Mm, yeah.
I think, with regards to with my writing, for example, I know a lot of people who also dabble in writing, and and everyone's got different writing styles. So I'm not going to go in and judge
Yeah.
various ones, but a lot of people can spend an endless amount of time on just prepping the story, coming up with the world building, getting ready to go and write something, and they never get around to writing it. And,
Yeah.
and and I'm guilty of this too. I have a lot of ideas, and it's like I don't know if I'm feeling like I can do this, and so I spend even more time fooling around with ideas. And sometimes that's healthy, but there's a point where eventually
Yeah.
you need to put pen to paper or your fingers on the keyboard and just
Yeah.
write that thing out. And it may
Yeah.
not be, in its best form yet, but the key part to me is to get started doing something. And
Yeah.
and then, the further and further you get into doing it, the more committed you are to following through with it. And so to
Mm,
me, I think that's the most important thing is you may not feel like you're ready yet, but you're never going to be fully ready. You can spend an infinite amount of time just coming up with ideas or thinking about stuff. The act of doing is the most important part, like on a macro level. And
yeah. Yeah.
and by doing things, you realize the areas that you're deficient in, but you
Hmm.
also come across things that you never knew you were capable of. And
Yeah.
so, I think the aspect where you are going out and just trying, it is very enlightening in and of itself, and it gives you the tools to get better as time goes on. You may not go and succeed the first time making something that's good or compelling, but
Yeah,
you will
you
learn
probably
lessons.
won't.
Yeah, I
We'll
mean,
just be real. You probably
yeah,
won't. My
right,
first
yeah,
films are crap.
yeah, yeah, right. That I was showing you some of our old Precinct movies, and and there were things before
Yeah.
that, even the sketch comedies that we were doing in elementary school, all that kind of stuff.
Yeah.
I would very much cringe to go and show that to someone now, but and look, you're never going to make anything perfect either. You're never going to be fully
Yeah. Yep.
satisfied. Even the stuff
Yeah.
that like I'm more proud of, obviously, movies like Shadows of the Precinct or The
Yeah.
Precinct Redemption. But there are always things that I feel like, oh, we could have done a little bit better on this or that or
Yep.
whatever. But at the end of the day, I'm a lot happier and more proud of the fact that I actually went through with it than not doing
Yeah.
any of it or
Totally.
just spending all that time on prep time.
Yeah.
So, that to me is one of the main aspects, I guess, technically of making a film. And then,
Yeah.
another macro aspect is just, we've been harping on this, but figure out something that you want to say about the human condition. And it doesn't have to be something deep, okay? It doesn't have to be
Yeah.
like this ultimate statement on what the meaning of life is. But everything that we do has some sort of comments in some way on life or what we're doing
Mm.
or what we're up to or the jobs that we do or whatever. And so think about stuff that relates to you, and write stuff that's genuine and honest, to either your beliefs or your heart. And
Yeah.
I think that'll help you go and craft stories that feel like they have a bit of truth to them.
Yeah.
I think that's a key aspect when it comes to storytelling. And then on the micro level, I think surrounding yourself with creative people who are talented. You've been
Yeah.
involved in stuff with the
Yep.
Precincts, and then I've also helped you on movies, and we've
Yeah.
seen people who they bring things to the table that maybe you've never even thought of before.
Yeah.
There's material that's been elevated by what other people bring to, and be open to collaboration, and
Yes.
but also be willing to know like when to go and stomp your foot, or get your foot down, and be
Yeah.
like, no, like for the consistency of this, it has to be this way because it's going to affect a
Yeah.
scene. It's going to affect 5 scenes from now,
Yeah.
what we do here. And I saw that when you were directing on Moving On as well. uh, you know there were certain things that were happening, and I was like, this is actually going to take it a little bit maybe far afield from what you were going
Yeah.
for. And so it kind of needed to be reined back in a bit. And so you need to learn how to both collaborate but then also go in control if you're a director.
Yeah.
um,
Yeah.
and so, I think that's a key thing as well. And then the other part is, I think that filmmaking is like a muscle that it's something that
Yeah.
you got to work on. And, this is something that we're guilty of making all these Precincts, because it feels
Yeah.
like every time we take like, 2 or 3 or 4 year break or something like that, and we have to reinvent the wheel. But, working off that rust, on the
Yeah.
first filming day is always a tough time. And so,
Yeah.
always be dabbling in stuff, and be curious and keep your skills honed, I think is a
Mm.
key aspect to filmmaking or making a story or anything.
Man, Mike, you just like laid down the wisdom. That's all so good. No, I mean, like, I'm serious. I'm like, well, you write a inspirational book about like how to start filmmaking. But yeah, I just echo so much of that stuff, man. It's just like just starting something, just doing it. How many times do we all just say, I'm going to do this thing? Or we know people say, I'm going to do this thing, and that just never happens. And, how many excuses can we all make? I don't have the right camera. I can't do a blockbuster story. I don't have access to
Hmm.
locations. But what do you have access to? And it's like you said, we all have stories that relate to like to our human condition, that are genuine, that we can share with people. And that's what's interesting. That's what makes good characters, like we've talked about. And yeah, and I think your points about collaboration are so key. None of us are going to have everything. Filmmaking is so collaborative. Like, yeah,
Hmm.
there's things that I feel like I am really good at as a filmmaker, and like a director, and like shooting with the camera. But like, I I can't. I need other people. I literally need actors to film. I need other people to, read my scripts and edit and be like, hey, like, I like what you're saying here, but you need to change it. Like, no one is perfect. And like,
Right.
filmmaking is so collaborative. And I know it's really hard because it's like on YouTube especially, like, if you've come up like filmmaking through that way, and there's a lot of benefits to that, that's a big part of my story, but it can be so isolated. It can be like, I'm going to do this, I'm going to film this stuff by myself, but the more that you can collaborate with people, even if that's virtually, even if that's like getting into some different like groups, whether it's like on Discord, Facebook, Reddit, like whatever, like if you can get connected with other people, in real life and virtually, who can like speak into your creative process, like that is going to take you the furthest. Like that's going to elevate your films, because you can't do everything. As
No.
much as you try, as much as you want to, if you try to, you will fail. I mean, even when I do projects now, it's like I'm always just like, how can I like remove myself more from, like, I don't need to be doing 5 roles at once. If I could be doing like 2 roles, if I could be doing 1 role, that would be the dream. That usually doesn't happen. But
Yeah.
the more that you're able to focus on your sole thing, which is like telling the story or operating the camera or just writing the script, whatever it is, and you get other people who are really skilled, like you said, and you bring them in, it's just going to elevate the whole film. So
Yeah.
it's so important, and I feel like it's so hard, like I said, nowadays, because it's so much of like, I just want to do it for myself and do this and whatever. And it's like, we really need each other. Like filmmaking is the ultimate example of that.
Right. Yeah, exactly. And and to that, you find people that you trust and people who trust you in your decision
Yeah.
making. And I think that's a key thing. And then also the point that you were making about people saying like, oh, I don't know if I have the idea for like a blockbuster, or I can do it, execute it, or whatever. I think that limitations breeds creativity and breeds
Yeah. Yep.
also honest filmmaking as well. And I think, the fact that maybe CGI is abundant and all that kind of stuff in these big blockbusters allows them to get away with actually not having to think about the repercussions of their story, so they
Yeah.
just think they can go and hide things. And so, I think that limitations is something that's a good thing. And, you finding creative outlets and avenues to get around problems, it's a way of working out your brain also, and keeping
Yeah.
it agile. And so I think that that's a good thing sometimes as well.
Resource filmmaking. I mean, some of the best projects, I mean, you and I both, that we've done, like, we don't have access to everything. It's like, what do we have
Yep.
access to here locally in town? And like, how can we tell a story, like make it part of the story? It's like, oh, we can go get in like the Kern River Valley, like the riverbed. All right, how can we,
Yep.
how can we make that part of the story? And yeah, I think it is more of like, limitations breed creativity. So I'm totally with you on that. And yeah, I think like you were saying, like finding people you trust. Like we've worked on enough projects now, whether it's like your project and I'm contributing to it, or vice
Hmm.
versa, or we're collaborating together, where it's like I have a trust with you, where it's like I feel like I can share stuff with you, bounce ideas off of you, and like it like we can receive that. We have that energy together. And so I think that's a big thing for people watching. And I know it's hard. It's hard, but like finding like 1 or 2 people who can be like those people that you have that good level of trust with, where you can
Yep.
bounce ideas off of them, you can talk to them, they can be real with you. Like I think that's super important to have.
Yeah, everyone needs a good sounding board, and whether that takes the form of an actor, another producer, the cinematographer, all that kind of stuff. And knowing that you can kind of make either criticisms or suggestions in a
Yeah.
judgment-free environment, because you all are trying to work for the best product, not
Yes.
just being critical for the sake of it. I think
Yep.
that that is something that goes and produces good filmmaking as well.
Yeah, man, I appreciate so much you coming on here. Just, like as we've talked about all this stuff, any like closing thoughts or anything that's come to mind that you want to share?
Well, I just think that being able to go and tell stories is an honor and a privilege. I really like showing parts of myself that maybe I don't get to show, in my everyday life, my work or whatever, through
Mm-hmm.
the medium of film or in the books that I write. And, sometimes it's a little bit scary too. You're putting an aspect of yourself out there that,
Yeah.
is not maybe going to be approved of or
Yeah.
whatever. And also you don't know if it's going to be taken well or not,
Yeah.
the quality of the thing that you make. But, I think doing this doing these things, it makes me a better person. And I think it helps me in other aspects of my life. And
Yeah.
I enjoy sharing these parts of myself. And I find the act of filmmaking extremely rewarding. And not to say that
Yeah.
everything's easy about it. I mean, I've told you the stories about,
Yeah.
my difficulties making Shadows of the Precinct,
Yeah.
but some of our other movies. Um, but the end result is something that I think is very meaningful, because that's something that's permanent, that can't be taken
Yeah.
away.
Yep.
And it's something that you can point to and say like, hey, I made that with other people. And that's a
Yeah.
pretty good feeling. So if anyone
Yeah.
who's watching this is interested in making anything, then I just recommend going out and doing it, and don't be afraid of what the reaction is going to be. Just make something that's honest and true to yourself. Don't you can take things from other people, but ultimately the thing that's going to be the best product is the thing that comes from you and your
Yeah.
personality.
Can you tell us where can people find you on YouTube? Where can they find the film? All the stuff, your books. Give us all the things.
Sure. So I have a YouTube channel. It's Penguin Productions. There might be a couple other Penguin Productions, but the ones that you'll notice are the ones that have the Precinct movies. Our most
Yeah.
recent movie is Shadows of the Precinct. You can find it on YouTube. You might also go and find it in some film festivals soon. I don't know. We'll see. Fingers crossed.
uh, yeah.
But then also, I write some fantasy novels as well. They're called the first one was called The Aurora War, and the second one is called The Ashen Prophecy. I've also finished a third book that I'm editing right now. They're all or going to be self-published books, but the first two are
Hmm.
available on Amazon right now. You can start with either one. I mean, they do tell a story that's chronological, but I wrote the second book to be standalone. And it also has an audiobook with a narration
Yeah.
by a UK radio presenter, Graham Mack, who's fantastic. He honestly maybe makes like the definitive version of these characters.
Yeah.
I just really loved hearing him uh, do the voices and do the character work, and that kind of acting, switching between 20 different characters was so incredible.
Yeah,
And
that's
then,
awesome.
additionally, you can look for our own endeavors together, Corey, you and I,
Yeah.
real perspective, the reviews that we did for movies, and then also on your new YouTube channel in
Yeah.
Penance and Vengeance, and my small little role in Moving On. So thanks for having me be a part of those as well.
Again, Mike, thanks so much for taking the time to have this conversation, joining us. And yeah, hopefully we get to work on some creative stuff in the future together, share it with everybody here. But yeah, thanks everyone for joining. Until next time, keep making movies and watching movies, and I'll see you on Real Filmmaking.